Color guard, parade the colors. Good afternoon. On behalf of the President of the United States, welcome to the John Quincy Adams Presidential Wreath Laying Ceremony. I present this wreath on President Adams' 258th birthday. Will the guests please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the national anthem. Military guests remain covered. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Color guard, post the colors. Will the guests please be seated? Military guests uncover. Thank you everyone for coming today. I'd like to introduce Ms. Jackson Miller. She is the new president of the United First Parish Church.
On behalf of the congregation at United First Parish Church, I am pleased to welcome you to the 258th birthday celebration for President John Quincy Adams and the presidential wreath-laying ceremony. We are grateful for your presence here today. We extend special gratitude to Commander Matthew Aaron Miller and the Navy Operational Support Center, Quincy. Thank you for your service, and we wish Commander Miller a happy retirement. We welcome back Alicia Ping as well, who is now with the Adams National Historic Park. We extend special gratitude to those offering remarks today. The Honorable Thomas Koch, Mayor, City of Quincy, Allison Duquette, Adams family descendant, whose remarks will be read by Reverend Rebecca Froome, and Mary Ann Peak, Superintendent, Adams National Historic Park. We are looking forward to hearing from our keynote speaker today, Alexandra Elliot, Executive Director, Quincy Historical Society. We appreciate the music from the Quincy Choral Society, accompanied by Norman Corey. Thank you to all our elected representatives attending today, UFPC members and friends, history and visitors program tour guides, welcome all. Please join us for a birthday cake reception in the parish hall following the ceremony, and throughout the afternoon, you are welcome to view the wreath. Thank you for coming today.
Will you take a deep breath together, feeling that spirit of life and love that moves within, between, and beyond us all. And I invite you to lift your hearts and join me in a spirit of invocation, listening in these words for the language of faith most meaningful to you. Eternal presence, known by many names, known in many ways. We gather this morning, this afternoon, here in the heart of Quincy, to remember one of the great citizens of this town, this commonwealth, this country, John Quincy Adams. Today, we turn our attention to his experience of the American Revolution, remembering that once this great man was a curious child, coming of age in a time of turmoil and war, of challenge and opportunity, full of unknowns. In this afternoon, may we open our hearts and our minds to remember the life and the legacy of this great man. May we open our hearts and our minds to be aware of the children in this city, in this commonwealth, in this country, who are curious and courageous, bold and afraid, looking at all of the unknowns and possibilities in this present moment. May our time here today be blessed, and may the legacy of John Quincy Adams be a blessing to the world. Amen. And I invite the Honorable Thomas Koch, Mayor, City of Quincy, to offer remarks.
Thank you, Reverend Froome, Commander Miller. distinguished members of our Navy, thank you for your service. Senator Keenan, our friends and collaborators in the historic and heritage world here in Quincy, and friends, it's great to be here today to honor such a great American. I think that his record of public service is probably unparalleled in our nation's history. When President Washington was appointing him Minister of the Netherlands, he said he's the most ablest of our diplomatic corps. Of course, as you know, he went on to serve in various roles and was the author of the Monroe Doctrine as Secretary of State. His presidency has got a renewed interest in recent years, and I'd suggest you check out the book, The Lost Founding Father. It's a pretty good book on his life and his dedication. He was known as Old Man Eloquent, and he was, they had to actually put a gag rule in to try to shut him up on the floor of Congress. And he wouldn't give up on the issue on slavery. When the National Observatory was dedicated, he was the keynote speaker. When General Lafayette died in France, the great friend of this cause, he was the keynote speaker invited by Congress. He spoke to both houses of Congress with President Jackson, the cabinet, in presence. By the way, his speech was 3 hours long. Can you imagine that today? He was a remarkable American, and his funeral was the biggest funeral with great pomp and circumstance that had been seen in this country until Abraham Lincoln. And I'd like to just read a quote by one of his political opponents when he died. Wherever his presence could give aid and countenance to what was useful and honorable to man, there he was. Where could death have found him but at the post of duty? As we know, he died on the floor of the House of Representatives. And in his writings in later years, he talked about those years in Congress being as happy as he is in public service. God bless his soul. What a great American, and we are grateful.
I bring greetings this afternoon from the Adams family, especially from Allison Duquette, Adams family descendant, who is unable to be here today. Ms. Duquette has written the following words in honor of John Quincy Adams and the American Revolution. She writes, "As those of you who grew up during World War II, or whose parents or grandparents have told you about their early years, know that war changes how you view the world and your future in it. At age 7, John Quincy went to the top of Penn's Hill with his mother, Abigail Adams, and watched the smoke of the battle and heard the cannons from 10 miles away. He wrote, I saw with my own eyes those fires and heard Britannia's thunders in the Battle of Bunker's Hill. It was 11 years later, at a remembrance of the battle, when he recognized how many of those present must be feeling. John Quincy Adams wrote, perhaps I am now seated on the grave of my dearest friend. Perhaps this is the spot where he drew his last gasp, and I may be now treading down his bones. In his diary in 1780, he quotes a lady's message to Hercules. If you would be honored by your country, you must take to serve it. In short, if you would be eminent in war or peace, you must become master of all the qualifications that make you so. And so at age 14, John Quincy did, serving as his father's secretary when John Adams was appointed as diplomat to seek French support during the Revolutionary War. John Quincy's early exposure to the trials of both war and peace are a great reminder that we must honor those who serve and ask our fellow citizens to serve only in the best interests of upholding our democracy. As John Quincy Adams wrote, a republic if you can keep it. Thank you, Allison Duquette, for these words. And I invite Superintendent Mary Ann Peak from the Adams National Historical Park to deliver remarks.
Thank you, Reverend Froome. It is indeed an honor to represent the National Park Service, Adams National Historical Park, at this occasion. On my way here, I couldn't help but think this would be a perfect opportunity to thank Reverend Froome, her staff, as well as volunteers, for the dedication and commitment they have to the Church of the Presidents, to the Adams Crypts, to their congregation, and to work in partnership with Quincy's historic community. Let's have a round of applause for Reverend Froome and her staff and volunteers. The Adams National Historical Park is open for visitation. We're open from Wednesday through Sunday. We invite you all to attend for self-guided tours and for some guided tours. We also want you to participate in our special events throughout the year. We are honoring the 400th anniversary of the City of Quincy by being a strong participator in their events, contributing as we can, as well as events we're planning for America 250, which is next year, 2026. So watch our social media, watch our website, look at Discover Quincy, and look at all the opportunities available to you to celebrate our community's history and our country's independence. Where it all began, think about it. At the foot of the farm at Penn's Hill, the John Quincy Adams birthplace, Franklin Street, when, on July 11, 1767, 258 years ago, please follow me on this road less traveled, 1767, when 9 years later, we faced the American Revolution, 1776. We can all remember being 9 years old, or we know a 9-year-old that's full of wonder and questions. But now imagine a child of 9 years old standing beside his mother, marching in cadence, step by step by step, saluting as weary, wounded soldiers marched past their home, a result of the Battle of Bunker's Hill. Their dear friend and physician, Colonel Joseph Warren, was killed at that battle of Bunker's Hill, and they had to survive that loss. Cannons were blasting, fires were raging in Boston. That home, that little home, which should have been filled with family, with laughter, music, and writing of letters to a father away in Philadelphia at the Continental Congress for the fight for independence. Instead, it became a makeshift hospital to serve others. And that 9-year-old boy, his name was John Quincy Adams. And how might he have experienced this event that shaped his future? We can only imagine. That early exposure to sacrifice, service, and the struggle for freedom shaped the rest of his life. Imagine absorbing at such a young age the values of freedom of speech, liberty, and self-governance, not as ideals, but as daily realities. This is how it began for John Quincy Adams, and from there, his path never wavered, not once. A year later, at the age of 10, imagine leaving your family. John Quincy Adams sailed to Europe to assist his father in diplomatic affairs while treating for peace. This began his extraordinary career in public service, becoming a global American diplomat. This should remind us today of the potential of our youth to provide them opportunities to succeed, pursue civic engagement and education, contributing to society as a lifetime commitment. And it also provides me the opportunity to thank our public servants who work today, committed to continuing to contribute to our American government and its successes. Today we celebrate John Quincy Adams' legacy with a presidential wreath and our presence being here. A fitting tribute, of course, yes it is, but is it enough? Not for John Quincy. He was shaped profoundly by his mother, Abigail, who often was left to raise him and her family alone as a single parent while her husband was dedicated to public service, not only in Philadelphia, but in Europe. Her determination, intellect, and dedication to education fueled his own lifelong devotion to learning, public service, and doing what was right. He mastered languages, studied law, explored diplomacy, and held firm to his moral compass. He believed in service and for reward, not just for reward, but for purpose. Known as Old Man Eloquent, as the mayor said, when he spoke in Congress, people listened. They paid attention. He didn't speak for applause, he spoke for the truth. His courage, his clarity, and integrity made him a voice of conscience, even when it cost him politically, and it did. Beyond politics, John Quincy was also a lover of the arts and sciences. He played the flute, while his wife Louisa played the harp. She was our first foreign-born First Lady. Their duets filled the home with music. Despite their differences, Louise was outgoing. She was social. John Quincy, not so much. He was reserved, often a loner, misunderstood, while exploring the wonder of science and nature. Their partnership was strong and deeply rooted in mutual love and respect. Upon her death in 1852, Congress closed for the day in her honor. Louisa Catherine was born in England in 1775. Think of this, 1 year before the Revolution. She wasn't born in 1776, she was born 1 year before. John Quincy Adams was 8. They were married in 1797 and she was 22. John Quincy was a swimmer. Yes, he swam in Black's Creek and even in the Potomac, and occasionally without a bathing suit. At least we're told that. He appreciated beauty in music, nature, and ideas, yet he carried deep personal loss, the deaths of his parents, especially while serving as president when his father died on July 4th, 1826, the same day as Thomas Jefferson, and it was the 50th celebration of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. This loss left him grieving and changed. His personal thoughts when returning to Quincy reflected that his home, known as Peacefield, will never be the same, and it wasn't. Still, he persevered, still influenced by the American Revolution, our country's fight for freedom and independence forever. Serving the people, his community, was important to him and drove his ambitions. He held nearly every major possible position in public life: an ambassador, secretary of state, representative, senator, congressman, president, and perhaps most memorably, he returned to Congress after the presidency to serve the people of his community right here for 17 years. He famously defended the many people in the Amistad case, arguing for their freedom before the Supreme Court. He stood against slavery at great personal risk. Pulitzer Prize author David McCullough once said John Quincy Adams may have been the brightest of all our presidents, and who would disagree with David McCullough? From negotiating peace as a teenager to shaping the future of our nation through education, law, science, and diplomacy, his influence lives on. In his own words, "You will never know how much it has cost my generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it." So today, we don't just say happy birthday to John Quincy Adams, we say thank you for the courage, thank you for the intellect, thank you for the character and the example. We are better for it. You know, he hoped to serve a second term as president. He lost to Andrew Jackson. What are the lessons learned from that? It's okay if we try and fail. but don't fail to try. Not bad for a 9-year-old. Thank you, and happy birthday, John Quincy.
Thank you, Superintendent Peak. And I invite Alexandra Elliot, Executive Director at Quincy Historical Society, to share remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. And on behalf of Quincy Historical Society, please allow me to express my gratitude at being granted a few minutes to address you all in commemoration of John Quincy Adams' birthday today. It is genuinely an honor and a privilege to do so. When Reverend Froome invited me to speak and told me that the theme chosen to reflect upon this year was John Quincy Adams and the American Revolution, I knew immediately what I would like to say. John Quincy Adams never served in the Continental Army. He never served in the Continental Congress, and yet his life was inexorably shaped by the Revolution. John Quincy Adams' life was never quite his own. From a young age, he was taught by his parents that he owed much to his country and that he must live his life in noble service of it. In his diaries, sometimes he laments the demands on his time, leaving little for the pursuit of his personal interests, poetry, the sciences, and the more intellectual explorations of the world. But true to his family's values, Adams never abandoned public life. His wife, Louisa Catherine, correctly assessed that his personal character would never truly allow him to retire, that he would always feel an obligation to throw himself back into the fray. It caused him great amounts of emotional and mental misery at times, but every single time that Adams reached a juncture where anyone would agree that he had done enough, that he had fulfilled his duties, that he could rest, every time, Adams willingly jumped back into the grueling work of public service. John Quincy Adams was an enigmatic figure. He was known for being unfriendly and stubborn. His allies often seemed to be just as frustrated with him as his rivals were. But when you read his diaries, you are presented with a deeply thoughtful man, a man who was enthusiastically curious about the world, who enjoyed theater, a glass or two of Madeira, and stargazing. The many contradictions of Adams's personality and character can be understood through the lens of what appears to be the driving force of his life, preserving the legacy of the American Revolution. Much of Adams's psyche was taken up by the concept of legacy, mostly his father's, but also those of his father's peers. Adams took it personally. His life demonstrates that he felt it was his purpose to ensure that the lofty ideals of the revolutionary generation were upheld and that their unfulfilled promises were addressed. There are few people in American history who have grappled with the legacy of the founding fathers more thoroughly than John Quincy Adams. Adams's life and soul were dedicated to ensuring that this grand experiment with democracy survived its first tumultuous decades in this country. When it comes to Adams's relationship to the American Revolution, two major periods of his life come to my mind. The first is the signing of the Treaty of Ghent, ending the War of 1812, during which Adams served as the chief negotiator of that treaty. For a diplomat, the signing of a treaty is one of the most significant achievements attainable. Months, if not years, of preparation, meetings, discussions, and negotiation go into the very precise language that ends a given conflict. In 1812, John Quincy Adams cemented his reputation as one of the best diplomats to ever serve the United States with the signing of the Treaty of Ghent, thus putting to bed some of the final pieces of contention between the United States and Great Britain after the Revolution. Now, for those of us who have not sat through a high school history class in some time, the War of 1812 was fundamentally an aftershock of the American Revolution. Some might remember the remarkable story of First Lady Dolly Madison rescuing a portrait of George Washington from the White House just before it was burned to the ground by invading British soldiers. Others might know that Massachusetts' own beloved United States Constitution earned her moniker Old Ironsides during a confrontation with the HMS Guerriere off the coast of Nova Scotia. With the end of the American Revolution, the matter of westward expansion quickly became the became a point of contention between the Americans and the British Empire. No agreement had been made about where the border between America and British Canada would lie. Other open questions remained as well regarding British interference with American affairs, including ongoing conflicts with Native American tribes, trade with France, and the kidnapping of American sailors. And so, America declared war. Blood was shed. Towns, cities, and villages were burned to the ground, including the United States Capitol. Almost as soon as the war broke out, various international parties started preparing for peace negotiations. The task of resolving these issues largely fell on John Quincy Adams' shoulders. At 44 years old, Adams had been serving as an American ambassador for nearly 20 years already. His earliest official appointment was granted to him by George Washington, as the mayor said, at the age of 27. This time, he was tasked with leading the American diplomats through the process of negotiating peace. Negotiations broke down in the first round. President Madison demanded that Britain hand control of Canada completely over to America, and the British insisted that a Native American buffer state be put in place between British and American territory, an irreconcilable set of demands. But as the war dragged on, and the British government saw that their military was not making the gains nor defending their own territory as effectively as they had expected, both sides returned to the negotiating table in good faith. The war ended with status quo antebellum, the situation as it existed before the war. Though many at the time considered this to be an insult to those whose blood had been shed in the conflict, it was a spiritual victory for a young country like America to defend itself for a second time against aggression from the greatest military power in the world. The war cemented America's reputation as a nation willing and able to stand up for itself, and the 1812 Treaty of Ghent paved the way for the stabilization of the relationship between Great Britain and the United States, and eventually for the special relationship that our two countries enjoy to this day. For John Quincy Adams, the signing of the Treaty of Ghent, no doubt, would have been a moment of cosmic serendipity. His father, the elder John Adams, had been a key member of the team that negotiated the 1783 Treaty of Paris, which ended the military conflict in the Revolutionary War. Thus, John Quincy Adams ensured that no more American or British blood would be shed on opposite sides of a battlefield ever again. The second episode of John Quincy Adams' life that I'd like to discuss is his congressional career. When a president leaves the White House, the vast majority see their opportunity to hold that office as the crowning achievement of their career. Whether out of satisfaction or exhaustion, few presidents go back into politics after their term ends. John Quincy Adams was not most presidents. He felt that there were still unfinished promises to address. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. By the time that John Quincy Adams was elected to the House of Representatives in 1830, that first fundamental promise of the Declaration of Independence remained unfulfilled. Slavery still existed in America. The Adamses, as a political dynasty, enjoyed the remarkable reputation of being one of the very few founding families to be vocally anti-slavery in their own day and age. For them, it was a matter of morality. But the elder John Adams was a pragmatist. He knew that in declaring independence from Britain, the American colonies would only succeed if they stood together, united. Hashing out the issue of slavery would have to wait. 60 years later, John Quincy Adams could clearly see what many others were willfully ignoring. The issue of slavery would tear the country apart and fundamentally threatened the success of our grand experiment with democracy. The issue had to be addressed. It was a cancer within the system, and with each state that was adopted into the Union, Adams understood that the spread of that cancer must be stopped in its tracks. As a congressman, John Quincy Adams became one of the champions of the anti-slavery movement. It was not a popular thing to be an abolitionist at that time. In fact, it was considered quite a radical thing to be. And John Quincy Adams was never a radical a day in his life. Yet, in this arena, he knew in his bones that his position was one of moral and ethical certainty. But as we all know, slavery was not abolished in Adams's lifetime. This was one part of the revolution's legacy which he could not see through to the end. But still, he did what he could, when he could, to move the cause forward. Congress even had to impose a gag rule on the subject of slavery to prevent Adams from speaking out about it. So when the opportunity came for Adams to directly help a group from the Mendi people of West Africa, he took it. These people, kidnapped from their homeland in what is now Sierra Leone, were not slaves. They were born free. And their kidnapping on the Spanish trade vessel, the Amistad, was illegal under international law. And yet, the owners of the Amistad argued the case all the way up to the Supreme Court. They said that the Mendi captives were slaves and had not been acting in self-defense when they mutinied off the coast of America. They had committed murder. John Quincy Adams knew injustice when he saw it, and so he waded back into the law, a career path that he had deliberately abandoned much earlier in his life. And he stood before the justices of the Supreme Court to speak on behalf of a group of people who were not permitted to speak for themselves. His arguments lasted for 2 days, and he concluded powerfully by pointing to a copy of the Declaration of Independence which hung upon the wall and said, "The moment you come to the Declaration of Independence, that every man has right to life and liberty, an inalienable right, this case is decided. I ask nothing more in behalf of these unfortunate men than this declaration." When John Quincy Adams died in 1848, his procession was the largest public funeral in the country's history to that point. Thousands lined the streets to watch his casket pass and to honor a man who had given every day of his life to their prosperity and well-being. Even his political rivals were forced to admit that Adams belonged not to any one state or political party, but to the American people. Adams believed that that is what the legacy of the Revolution demanded of its most ardent patriots. This grand experiment is more important than any one singular soul, greater than any one singular life. That it must be protected, that it must be advanced, constantly worked upon to fulfill that other promise made by the Founding Fathers, that we should always strive to be, in the words of the Constitution, a more perfect union. In the room with Adams as he lay dying were a number of people: his wife, Louisa Catherine, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and many other high-profile government officials. But also in the room was a junior representative from the state of Illinois, a man by the name of Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was not yet the great president that we all know today. On that day, Lincoln was simply a congressman paying his respects to the passing of a living legend. When John Quincy Adams died, a torch was passed within that room to the next generation of great leaders who understood, as Adams did, what it means to safeguard and maintain the legacy of the American Revolution. That torch has been passed to those of us here today, if we can keep it burning. Thank you.
We will now place the wreath from the President of the United States on the tomb of President John Quincy Adams. Please remain seated until the presentation is complete. We will return to retire the colors.
gracious God, as we remember John Quincy Adams on his birthday, as we stand here in the presence of his mortal remains, may we remember his spirit and embody that spirit in our lives so that his memory might be a blessing. Amen. And happy birthday. Give a round of applause to the Quincy Choral Society, directed by Sarah Labrie. Excellent, thank you all. How good it has been to remember and learn together. And I extend an invitation again to join us throughout the afternoon in the parish hall through these doors. We'll have birthday cake, and I invite all of you to go downstairs to the presidential crypt and see the wreath laid there and really appreciate the enormity of having 2 American presidents and 2 first ladies whose families chose for them to be buried here, not in Washington, D.C., not in a national cemetery elsewhere, but here, to return them to the town in which they lived, in which they grew up. And so let's return again to that deep breath of life and love as we lift our hearts for words of benediction. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, how grateful we are to be here today, to be here sharing the breath of life in this corner of planet Earth, where John Quincy Adams grew as a child, developed his mind, his moral compass, his sets of conviction. As we go forth today, may we go forth inspired, asking ourselves how we can serve our community in ways that are right and true, even if they are unpopular. May we ask ourselves what torch we inherit from our ancestors and carry that torch with commitment and courage into this moment of living history, so that we might one day be able to pass that torch and this democracy on to our children and children's children. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.
Flag detail, prepare to retire the colors. Will the guests please rise and military members cover? Retire the colors.